What we saw down here today is pure evil.
The headlines told the beginning of the story.
You have sort of the state apparatus attempting to, in some ways, try this case in the court of public opinion.
The courtroom will tell the rest. I'm Bryn Caswell.
And I'm Colin Dorsey. Join us as we continue following the Vinton County investigation, breaking down the facts, tracking every development, and separating what's known from what's still unanswered.
This sounds like a very troubling case.
You're listening to The Hidden Children on Ohmer Street, Episode 2.
Thanks for joining us for a 10 TV special, The Hidden Children on Ohmer Street. I'm Colin Dorsey.
And I'm Bryn Caswell. Welcome to Episode 2. As we continue to learn more information, we will be keeping all of you updated. So on June 30th, let's go back. A law enforcement executed a search warrant at 182 Ohmer Street and removed 16 siblings from inside. Their ages ranging from 18 months to 18 years old.
Right, and these children, along with the 4 adults that are now facing charges, were found in living conditions that law enforcement have described as, quote, deplorable and, quote, pure evil. Now, the children's grandparents and parents have been charged with 16 counts of child endangerment each. You see them on your screen here. 73-year-old Gary Siders Sr., 67-year-old Christina Siders, 36-year-old Gary Siders Jr., and 33-year-old Elizabeth Siders. Now, we do know that several of the children, after being found and taken by authorities, needed medical care. Some were in critical condition, and authorities say they could have died if they had been in that house for much longer.
Gary Siders Sr. has been released on a recognizance bond and is receiving medical treatment currently. The prosecutor could not share his condition, but said his treatment could have bankrupted the county, which is partially the reason he had been released. Attorney for Elizabeth Siders has requested she too be released on a recognizance bond and has told 10 TV that she has asked to see her children since she's been placed in jail. Now, right now, Vinton County Children's Services, they are working to place the children into foster care. They've not shared any public information, though, with us about the kids since the week that they were found.
Right, and child services advocates, along with local law enforcement, have assured us that these children are safe, but the immense amount of resources to suddenly place these 16 children all at once, especially in a county the size of Vinton County, fewer than 13,000 people, and also the county with, stacks up as number 8 for the lowest income in the state of Ohio. The resources needed for this and to find them in a county this size will be difficult.
It's expensive. We want to bring in 10 TV News reporter Carla Rogner now. Carla, you've been boots on the ground in Vinton County since we found out about these 16 children living in this house. And the biggest question a lot of people have is how are basically 20 people living in a house of that size? In 10 TV, we have obtained birth records for 15 of the 16 children, which is giving us a little more insight into where exactly these children were born. We do know they were twins born in 2022. What can you tell us about these findings?
Well, last time we talked, we didn't even know if they had birth records at all, and the prosecutor said that was something they were still looking into. So it's unclear why we're missing just one of those. It's a birth record for one of the twins that was born in 2022. But the biggest takeaway from these birth records is it tells us that all of these children were born in hospitals. So from 2008 to 2022, all of the children were born at the hospital Holzer in Gallipolis, Ohio, which is where the Siders family lived at that time. And then after that is when we have that birth record for those twins that sadly passed away in November of 2022. Those twins, they were born conjoined. They died about an hour after they were born, but they were born at Riverside Hospital here in Columbus. And then the last 2 sets of twins, they were both born at Oblenis Hospital. That's over in Athens. So we have to remember that she had 3 sets of twins there in a row, in addition the twins that passed away, so 4 sets of twins, but all of them were born in hospitals.
Right, and some of your reporting and records requests over these really last 2 weeks have revealed some of the previous home addresses of the Siderses at the time of those births, but some of those requests also brought forward some new questions. What were you able to find out?
Yeah, well, these birth records have been really helpful for kind of trying to put some of these puzzle pieces together. And we know from authorities that they said that the family moved around a lot, and that's definitely what these birth records show. So I wrote down every time one of the children was born, they had to list their home address. And so from 2008 to 2019, or actually 2008 to 2022, the family had different addresses in Gallia County. So the first one in 2008, and then we only have their addresses beginning when the first child was born. But 2008, they lived at a home in Gallipolis, Ohio, and then the next year, when the next child was born, they moved. They moved to Bidwell, which is still in Gallia County. But they lived in that same home, which was interesting, from 2009 until 2016. And then there's another address in Bidwell, a new address in Gallipolis, and then an address in Cheshire. So a lot of moving around, like authorities said. We don't really know why. But the biggest question is, in 2022, Elizabeth gave birth to a set of twins at Holzer in Gallipolis, but their address is listed in Bloomer, Wisconsin. She gave birth in Ohio. So that's kind of a question of where that address came from. That's the furthest away. I mean, the rest of the addresses are in Southeast Ohio still. And then the last two sets of twins, when they were born, the first set of twins was in Cheshire, still in Gallia County, but it's only 2025 when those twins were born that they list an address in Hamden. And it's a different home than the home that these children were found in as well. It's just a little bit further up the road. So that's another question that we have, because authorities said it was their belief that they lived in that home in Hamden on Ohmer Street for the last 4 years. But according to these birth records, they were living in a different home over on Main Street at that time, just a year ago.
And as time's gone on, it's been about 2.5 weeks since this all came to light. We've learned a lot of new information. When this first came out, it was unclear if any of the children had ever attended school at all. But 10 TV was able to obtain records from Gallia County Juvenile Court, and that's when we learned that the state had filed some truancy complaints against the mother, Elizabeth, along with the father, Gary Jr., and the 6 oldest kids. These were all filed, October 19th, 2021. So
Yes.
we know that there were the questions of, had any of these children gone to school, but how did nobody report them, and what kind of documentation is there now that we know that at least there are some truancy complaints out there?
Right, and that's a big deal to note, that there was someone at some point who was keeping track of these children in the school system. And so the complicated thing is, this was over at the Gallia County Local School District. They can't tell us much about the Sider family because of privacy laws. It's only because this court record was filed that we were able to obtain any of this. But October 2021, like you said, they sent a notice to Elizabeth, Gary, and 6 of the oldest children. They were about 7 to 13 at the time. And the district said that they hadn't shown up for any of the school year in October 21. So at that point, school had been in session for several weeks, and they hadn't shown up at all. But what happened is, then a few months later, they have a follow-up in January, and they said that this matter was terminated because they couldn't find the whereabouts of these kids. They couldn't serve these notices. They couldn't do anything about the truancy request. So the big mystery is, where were they? Because according to the birth records at that time, they were still living in the address in Cheshire, in Honeysuckle Drive, which is where the truancy notices were filed at. So that's a big question. And also, I talked to the Gallia superintendent just on background. He didn't want to speak on camera to us, or, again, concerns about that privacy, but he explained to me the process for truancy, and he said that they have one person who kind of monitors attendance, and when children don't show up for school, of course, that's reason for concern. So they file these truancy notices, but they'll also do wellness checks. They'll send a sheriff to check on the house, but if nobody's there, they can't do anything. And he said that they would keep trying to find the children unless one of two things happened. Either the children move out of state, or there's reason to believe they've enrolled in another school district and they get that notification. But in this case, we don't really know how this all resolved, or if it ever resolved.
So we do know the notice was terminated after 3 months. So what did the school have to say about not being able to find them?
Again, they couldn't really share any specific information, but what's also interesting is when we look at these birth records, they served the notice to the address that they were living at in Cheshire. But then 2022, which is a few months after they said they couldn't find the children in November, is when Elizabeth gave birth to another set of twins in Ohio, but listed their home address in Bloomer, Wisconsin. So that brings forth the question of, did the school district believe that they moved to Wisconsin? And is that why they couldn't track them? And we do know that, if they moved back to Ohio at any point, they never re-enrolled their kids in school. Vinton County says we have no records of these children. And at the time that they were found, authorities said that they were not in school.
Right, which kind of does support that claim that at least in their time in Vinton County for the past 4 years, there was no record of education, and that last attempt of some sort of enrollment was all the way back in 2021.
So that Bloomer address, though, is interesting. I want to kind of circle back to that Bloomer, Wisconsin address, because if that's the reason that the school district kind of couldn't find the kids because they believed they were living in Wisconsin, I did look into that address a little bit more. It's a rural part of northwest Wisconsin where they said they were living, and I called the property owner, and he said some interesting things that kind of bring some more questions forth. He said that in 2022, nobody was living at that property. In fact, it had been vacant since 2017, and they had demolished it around 2021, 2022.
Oh.
So there's a question, could they have been living there? I sent him pictures of them, their mugshots that we have, and he said he never seen those people before. And he said that his father would go and check on that property every week or so. So they would know if at that time there was a family of 14, they would have known if they were living there.
Right, and this was 4 years ago then. I mean, do you think they were moving around all the time? Where do you think they were going to school then?
Well, we don't know.
Right.
I mean, the authorities are saying they weren't going to school.
Okay, so were they maybe homeschooled? We don't know.
We have no idea, and we don't know what their schooling was like before that truancy report in 2021. We don't know if they were regular attenders of the school, too, because the school can't tell us that information, unfortunately. But some of the youngest children, we don't know if they've ever been in the classroom, and we don't know what happened after that truancy notice.
All right, so let's talk about this house. Investigators have not released any official images from inside. We've obviously seen all the images from the outside, kind of the trash that's filling the yard, the caution tape that remains up. But if you've been on social media recently, you can see all of these images that look like they were taken from inside of the home. You guys have been down there. We don't know if these images are AI or if people have broken in, but obviously, William Archer, the Vinton County prosecutor, is speculating a little bit on that. You guys have been there to the house, Libby. I'm going to start with you. What have you been able to see from the inside?
Well, I'll just say there is a lot of misinformation online. There is a lot of AI, but as you note, Bryn, it does seem that people have been going inside of the house, crossing that police tape illegally. We at 10 TV are not going to cross that line, obviously, but talking to neighbors too, they say they've seen people go inside of that house. So again, we can't verify what's true or not. We're not going to show that, but it's clear people are going inside. And I have also talked to neighbors who, just knowing so many people, even people coming from out of state, just to get a glimpse of this house, they've since installed some cameras on the sides of their home. I've seen some no trespassing signs put up. Those weren't there, 2 weeks ago, but now those are there because so many people are coming and, unfortunately crossing that tape to the test of the authorities here.
And Carla, you've been there too. What have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, like she was saying, even 2 weeks later, we were there on Monday, and it's still a constant stream of traffic, and it's a dead-end road, so people are just going to get a glimpse of the house. Some of them are just trying to understand how this happened. They want to see it, but a lot of people, I talked to someone who drove from an hour away just because they've been following the story and wanted to see it. And, there's that yellow tape all in front of the house still, and you can't see anything on the inside if you're standing in front of that tape. You'd have to walk past it, which is trespassing. There is a window that is broken, so I can see how people would be getting a look inside, but unfortunately, that's illegal, and we can't be doing that.
Yeah, and as we've talked with the prosecutor, William Archer, that people who are caught doing this can face some serious charges.
Yeah, he's saying don't do it. I stopped by the courthouse this week and got a quick chance to talk to him. Here's what he had to say.
People who are going on to Ohmer Street need to be aware it's potentially a trespassing charge, and it could be a more serious obstruction charge. So the best advice is stay off the property if you don't have permission from the owner to be there.
And your office is looking into these videos?
We are investigating potentially who has been going on to the property, yes.
Archer would not confirm the authenticity of videos we showed him and said his office cannot share images from the inside as this investigation is ongoing.
There's a lot of AI stuff still going on out there, so we're still trying to sort out how much of this is real.
Yeah, so he brought up a good point. He didn't verify any of the images. We don't know what's AI. People are breaking in and crossing that line, which is illegal, but this is still an active investigation. You can break the law if you cross over and you enter that house. So just disheartening. And again, you can't believe everything you see online.
Yeah, and that's what's important to note is no official photos of this house have been shared.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also just note, when you go down there is no deputy. There's no one guarding this home. And you can see how the police tape started 2 weeks ago. It's kind of fallen down, but it's kind of to show the resources of this county are stretched. They can't guard this home at all time. So authorities are counting on people to not cross that line.
last 2.5 weeks, we've learned a lot of new information, and a lot of that information has come from Elizabeth Sider's defense attorney.
Right, because as we mentioned, we wanted to find out what was going on inside that home. Her attorney, Tommy Stoley, was able to answer some of those questions. We found out a lot of new information with what he had to say.
Is it your understanding that the kids were forced to stay inside?
I don't think we've seen any evidence to prove that. There's been no evidence to suggest that there were any restraints in the home, that the children were locked or forced to remain in the 12 by 12 room. I think this is one of the things that's been really sensationalized on the internet.
Is it your understanding that she wanted to be pregnant this many times and give birth to this many children?
So what she's told me repeatedly is that she and Gary wanted a big family. I don't know if they wanted a family that was this big, but she's repeatedly said to me that she wanted a big family. She said that kids are a gift from God.
Has she talked to you about how the kids were treated at all, how they fed them, or what the dynamic was like inside of the home?
Absolutely. So quite honestly, when I go into the jail, I've been there 3 times. Every time I go there, we end up talking about the kids for a significant portion of our visit. What she tells me is that the kids had phones. Some of them had social media, the older kids. I don't know how active they were on that social media, but she tells me that they had little inside jokes. And I think the big thing with that is it doesn't jive with the way that this case has been characterized in the public. Because when you use language like feral kids, you're imagining people that have been isolated away from human contact, people who have never interacted with any sort of social media, with the internet, with humans outside of their own home, or even humans in general, who are completely lack the ability to use language. There's nothing to suggest that that is the case here.
So the kids can communicate.
That's my understanding, yes.
So really, throughout these past couple weeks, the attorneys in this case, the prosecutors, law enforcement, for the most part, have been really forthcoming with information. But now a judge has granted a gag order. And what that means is that all of these people who we've been getting new information from for really the past 2.5 weeks can no longer speak to this case.
Right. Attorney R. Lee Roberts, who's representing Gary Jr., asked for this gag order because of concerns and comments made by law enforcement. We've heard it from AG Andy Wilson saying this is pure evil. We heard it from the Vinton County Sheriff describing the state of the children as the livestock has been kept better. And Gary Jr.'s attorney is arguing that this could really impact his right to a fair trial. So we know more information, but is this where it ends for now until we go to court?
It's really going to change how we get information. Again, like we just heard from Tommy Stoley, the attorneys in this case have been pretty good at communicating with us, sharing updates on their clients, and this is going to change a lot of things. And there is reason for this. We've heard it from several of the attorneys, not just Gary Jr.'s, but Elizabeth's attorney, Gary Sr.'s attorney. They've all had concerns with how this case has been portrayed so far by law enforcement, specifically the term pure evil. We've heard the term feral from law enforcement, and they take issue with that and how it could sway public opinion this early in the investigation. And in the motion, R. Lee Roberts, he's the attorney for Gary Siders Jr., the descriptions of the children that have been issued by the public officials involved in this case seek to do nothing other than inflame the heart and passion of the potential jurors. These concerns are amplified by the nature of the small community in which the instant case occurs. And it is a small community.
Mm-hmm.
Vinton County, if they ever do have to find a jury there, everyone there is talking about this case.
Right. And you have the gag order, Libby.
Yes, and to the point that it's a small county, I spoke to a volunteer firefighter who responded the day that these 16 kids, they say, were rescued, and he's also the clerk of courts for Vinton County. He spoke to me, and our interview is cited in this gag order. We spoke to him last week about those conditions. He talked about taking some of those children to the hospital that day. He says that they had blank expressions. He says that they had scratches or bug bites on them. He described a smell to them.
Whatever it may be, I don't know how to describe it. Just a mess. I think our sheriff, Ryan Kane, he described it pretty well with our livestock live better when it comes to the environment around them. than what these children were in.
The attorney for mom, Elizabeth Siders, meanwhile, says the case has been sensationalized and that his client keeps asking about her kids.
So Elizabeth has been getting care packages in jail. What does she do today? She brings out a letter and she said, is there any way for me to get some of these care package items to my kids? Because she's thinking about her kids in jail.
And the reason that he's in this gag order is because he's the clerk of courts. He's on this filing. There's going to be a lot of motions in these cases. This is the beginning of a long legal process. And Jeremiah Griffith, also this volunteer firefighter, is the clerk of courts. He's going to be dealing with all of these filings. So that's why Gary Siders Jr.'s attorney listed him along with the attorney general, along with the sheriff, as saying these comments could hurt his client's chances to a fair trial.
And we know right now that the other attorneys are checking if the defendants, that this gag order also applies to them, correct?
Yes.
So we heard from Dorian Baum, he's the attorney for Gary Siders Sr., and he said because this was filed by Gary Jr.'s attorney, it silences the prosecutor, law enforcement, everyone, but they're not sure if it silences them. So they're checking on that.
Right, because it's a difficult question to answer because even though these are being tried as 4 separate cases, it's all intertwined.
Right. How do you talk about one of them without talking about all of them? Right. So that's the question. We don't know if we'll be able to hear from Tommy Stolle anymore or Dorian Baum, or we haven't heard from Christina's attorney, but they're checking on that.
All right. And even with the new information that we've been able to obtain in the last week, we still do have a lot of unanswered questions. We do have some requests out there. For example, we do have requests out for the body-worn camera video from those with the Vinton County Sheriff's Office who went into that home that day, other first responders looking for that booking video of when they were booked into the Vinton County Jail, and then also any incident reports that were filed after this and also leading up to this.
And we know they want to have this trial in Vinton County, but these individuals haven't even been indicted yet.
Right, and we do know because of the size of Vinton County, grand juries don't meet that often.
No, like every other month.
It's about an every other month thing. We would expect an indictment, if that happens, to come down in the next couple weeks.
So the big question a lot of people online still have been asking in the last 2 weeks is how to help these kids. We have heard from the state, and they say there really isn't a way to get donations directly to these kids right now. They're working to set up accounts, so hold off on those donations. But this week, the state did vote to give $1 million to these children. That'll go to their physical, mental health needs and anything that they need. But that money's only projected to last about a year or so. But they do have that aid for now, so it's a starting point.
Right. So again, this is now 2.5 weeks in. We know about the gag order now. How this moves forward and the information we learn after this, I mean, it could be limited.
Question mark.
Big question mark.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep following this for you guys.
So that's going to wrap episode 2 of The Hidden Children on Ohmer Street.